Good day and welcome to Caribbean Connect. Today we will speak to Mr. Patrick Antoine. He is the CEO of the Caricom Private Sector Organization. Mr. Antoine, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It's good to be here in Suriname.
Absolutely.
How do you like the weather so far?
I love the weather. I love
Mhm,
the people.
mhm.
I love the food. Not necessarily in that order, but it's all good.
But I think the food is in the first place.
And let me tell you, the food here is magnificent. Magnificent.
Thank you so much for that. Mr. Antoine, we would like to know more about your organization. It's an associate institute of CARICOM. What are the issues and what are you talking about with the CARICOM leaders when you're sitting at the table?
Well, thank you. Well, let me first give you a sense of where the CARICOM private sector organizations come from. This organization, private sector, has been an organization that was conceived, thought about uh, during the time of the original uh, uh, coming together of
Mhm.
leaders to create a uh, unified Caribbean space. And so the vision of the leaders at the time, what we call the framers of this integration movement, was that the private sector, labor, civil society, along with member states, in short, all the peoples of the Caribbean, could together work towards this goal of an integrated Caribbean as a single space where there were no distinctions according to nationalities and where people could in fact move from one country and across the region freely, where there would be the free trade of goods and services, the free transit of goods and services across geographic borders, so that distinction between a Trinidadian in Trinidad and a Trinidadian in Suriname, or a Suriname national in Suriname and a Suriname national in Trinidad, they'll be subject to the same, benefits in terms of the movement and rights of establishment, how we establish businesses in each other's country. Also, in terms of how we deal with something called contingent rights, the ability to bring your family and so on with
Yeah.
you when you establish. And so the original framers of the integration grouping, they had a vision of such a place called CARICOM, a community of
Mhm,
people with all of these rights that inured, that they
mhm,
enjoyed. And so the original Treaty of Chaguaramas tried in various ways to bring the private sector into the decision-making process in CARICOM. But it was not until 2019 that the heads got together and decided that the time to fully bring the private sector, the decision-making process through the councils and organs and bodies of the community,
mhm.
that time had come. And so in 2020, the CPSO was born. It was born out of a decision of heads, which really meant that the private sector was recognized as a representative force in the integration grouping. And the name of this animal was the CPSO. So the
Mhm.
CARICOM Private Sector Organization is really an embodiment of the vision, right, of the framers of the integration grouping, which has been manifest, right, given now this representation by heads in this decision in 2020. And our role is to contribute fully to the achievement of the CARICOM single market and economy, so that whatever it takes in supporting the heads of government in achieving the vision of this single through the CSME, that is the role of the CARICOM the CARICOM private sector organization.
Okay, since its inception in 2020, as you have mentioned, what are the achievements so far?
Well, that's a good question. We were born just in the crucible of the struggle with the pandemic. And so our ability to move was curtailed. But even so, it didn't stop the institution from contributing. And the first thing we did was to do a very deep uh, policy paper to assist countries in the, let us say, best practice, the best examples from the private sector on dealing with risk management, etc.,
Mhm,
coming out of COVID. In short, what we tried to do was to say to the states that were then grappling with this decision of how do we bring countries out of what we call lockdown. Countries essentially had come to a sudden stop. What we did is that we put together this you would say in your language sometimes manifesto, this manual, right, on how we could assist countries in having a framework which would allow them to assess the risk, what was high risk, what was low risk, which sector could be taken out of lockdown first, which sector posed the greater risk and would have to wait later. We put that framework together and we circulated it to all the countries. That was the first thing. The second thing we did is that we engaged a very important initiative that the region had been struggling with called the front of package labeling. So some people say the FOPNL, front of package nutritional labeling, right? Which is in fact the attempt by the region to put in place a common standard on how we would deal with labeling food and drink, yes, that contributed to what we call the high incidence of non-communicable diseases in CARICOM. Now, non-communicable diseases, to just put that in context, is the leading cause of death in our countries. And so, as you well know, addressing it and certainly at the core level is an issue that really does attract the attention of all of us. And certainly the private sector is part of that movement that wishes to do all it can to address non-communicable diseases. Front of package labeling is one such attempt through policy of putting in place a common framework so that the consumers in CARICOM could tell which foods are high in sugar, which foods are high in salt, which foods are high in fat. And so by basically giving them, as it were, a very simple indicator, guide, framework for assessing what was high in and what was low in, they could make informed decisions about the food and drink that they were in fact going to purchase to consume. And of course, the assumption is that if we can lead people to better decisions, to more informed decisions, and that led them to purchase products that were not bad for their health, then we could impact the non-communicable diseases through that route. And so we believed in the private sector that while we are 100% committed to non-communicable diseases, we live in the same societies. We employ a lot of the people in the community as well. Next to government, clearly you would understand that the private sector is the second largest employer. So we have a vested interest in dealing with non-communicable diseases, including rallying around an appropriate front of package labeling scheme for the CARICOM countries. And so we the forces in looking at how we could bring the collective might, the information of the private sector to work along with governments and civil society in arriving at the best front of package labeling scheme for our community. That was the second thing that we engaged on. The third thing is that the region entered into something which is called the Common External Tariff and the Rules of Origin. And that's a set of trade arrangements. We call it the trade regime. And this trade regime, in fact, governs the way in which goods are imported into Suriname. It governs the way in which goods are imported into Barbados and the rest of the community. It's a common framework. Now, it doesn't mean that it has to be the same rate on everything, but insofar as it's possible, we try to make it the same rate on everything. But what it does mean is that we've all committed to a harmonized framework so that by looking at whether it's in Antigua or in Belize or in Guyana or in Dominica, you really could see that the countries were all committed to the same harmonized approach to dealing with the way in which goods and so on could enter from what we call third countries, like the United States, like Europe, yes, like Latin America, could enter into the Caribbean countries. So it doesn't matter where you've come from. These goods, in fact, would enter in broadly the same way. And what we've done is that we've recognized, as the community has, that putting this regime that is so important for us, because it also determines in many instances the level of taxes that we're able to collect. And of course, in many countries, these are what we call trade taxes at the border. These are either first or second in terms of their importance to government revenue. So we're dealing with a very important regime. And what we did is that in working with the community, recognize CET and rules of origin was put in place in 1992, but in some instances not fully implemented in some countries until 1996, and in others a few until 2001. What we did is that we recognized that so much has happened that it was necessary for us to review the common external tariff and the rules of origin. So we came together in an initiative led by member states, by governments, and we brought the private sector, which we say is the engine of growth. We say the private sector is the engine of economic activity. We put the private sector, the collective private sector capacity, to work with the member states, with governments, with the countries, to get reform, to bring reforms to the common external tariff and the rules of origin, so that a private sector perspective would say that this rule of origin, as we call it, which is nothing more how we agree on what are the features that would help to determine if a good that was produced in CARICOM is eligible to circulate and to benefit from the rights within the Caribbean community. We believe that so much has happened in terms of technology. So much has happened in terms of the production structure in CARICOM. So much has happened in terms of innovation, the way in which products were now put together, combined, the way in which new products had emerged. We believe that it was necessary for us to bring the private sector's input into this process of reform. And so what we've been doing is working diligently with the member states and the CARICOM Secretariat in looking at the reform to this very important set of rules that determines how our region faces the rest of the world as a community,
Okay, you're talking about production, and we know that the Caribbean CARICOM countries annually they import like for $6 billion food from outside of the region. What is the role for your organization in achieving what the heads want now, that by 2025 to cut the import bill by 25%? What is the role that your organization wants to play in that to achieve that?
I'm smiling at the way you've left this as a standalone, because I think it is so important. The CPSO, at the invitation of heads, received a mandate to begin work on what we now call the 25 by 25 initiative. We made a very informed presentation with the support of the information from the CARICOM Secretariat, international statistics agencies, and the member states on the ground, because we have a lot of information in CARICOM that we good strategic use of. The CPSO brought all of this together, coming from the mandate of heads of government, and we presented to the heads of government a very comprehensive view, both of what the opportunities would look like, right? And we identified first 7 opportunities. What we've done since then is that we've now identified 12 more opportunities. So in total, we've identified 19 big opportunities for displacing imports. Now, this doesn't mean that tomorrow we're going to go out there and just get rid of the imports in these 19, what we call opportunities. We have to test them. We have to subject them to financial and economic feasibility. We have to subject them to the technological, right, and other technical feasibility as well. So what we're in the process of doing now, right, is working with the other CARICOM institutions, because the CPSO is nothing but a service organization. To serve ourselves, we're here really to service the member states, and in serving the member states, to service the collective goodwill of all Caribbean peoples. And we just happen to do that from the perspective of the private sector. So we are a service organization. And in serving the community, what we're able to do is to identify those opportunities, and we're now subjecting a lot of them to further feasibility to determine if they are really what we call real opportunities for displacing imports from third countries. So let me tell you that we identified poultry. where within ourselves, let me just say properly, among ourselves, among the countries, within the community, but among the countries, we are trading, right, exporting and importing from each other, less than 1% of what CARICOM, less than 1% of what CARICOM consumes. In short, let us say 100 pounds of poultry, right, that is consumed in our community, 1 pound. 1 pound is being traded from within the community, which means 99%, 99 pounds
Come from outside.
is from outside. And for a community that has land and water and people and specialists, we have more postgraduate people in agriculture in some countries than many larger developing countries. People miss that. We have all sorts of universities producing people in science and technology, but we haven't been able to translate that, yes, into concrete benefits on the ground. So poultry is one opportunity. We also identified the ruminants, sheep meat, goat meat, yes? Those are opportunities, again, for which amongst ourselves we're trading less than 1%. 99 countries like Australia, New Zealand, and the United States and Canada and the rest of the world. But right here in the Caribbean, less than 1% of that is traded amongst ourselves. And again, we're saying that's not good enough. The time has come for us to really grab these opportunities and subject them to the feasibility that we're talking about. Again, I'm not moving away from that. Subject them to the feasibility that we're talking about to see what the genuine opportunities for increasing or intra-regional production and trade would look like. And that for us is very important. Another one we picked up was, for instance, this issue of coconut water. And we say coconut water, but we really mean coconut products in all its dispensations. I identified water because it's a fast-growing segment. But that is going to be, if we're not careful, saturated soon. But there's coconut oil. There's almost every single consumer product now in industrialized countries, when you look at the companies producing consumer care products, has some element of coconut in it. We were one of the world's big coconut producers per capita, which means for every person.
Yeah.
And we lost that, of course, over the years for several reasons. But we've been taken over by Asia and of course, by South America. We have to regain that positioning. And although I'm talking to you about assessing the financial and economic feasibility of a lot of these things, the reality is that we already know how to do a lot of these things. And given the new cultivars, given the new technology, given what we've learned over the years, and the specialists that are available to us from countries that are friendly countries, we know that we're going to be able to deploy a lot of what we're talking about into very lucrative financial opportunities, including for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Now, what we're talking about here is not just for big companies. There are opportunities in this space, this CARICOM space, in terms of production and value-added products for all kinds of farms, farmers, intermediaries. These are the guys who buy, and they actually help us in what we call the value chain, because they help to move the product. There are all kinds of opportunities in there for all size firms. Okay. And of course, I want to go very quickly to this other one, which is corn. Corn, we know, there are some countries such as Belize where they've been able to produce corn quite feasibly. The issue, of course, was the opportunity of moving it from Belize to the rest of the region. And again, those are some of the opportunities we want to look at. So we have 19 opportunities, including vegetables, a whole range of them. Yes, some of the countries are interested in beef. We are assessing them. I want to leave it with the community that we're not saying tomorrow we're going to go out, because the worst thing that we can do to the community is to hold up a false promise. What we do know is that of these 19 and more, that there are a lot of lucrative opportunities inside there, and it's just for us to find them. Okay. And this is really what the CPSO is working towards with the community. We're working towards finding where these opportunities are. A big one is one you have here, cassava, in all its dispensations. We've just begun to touch the surface of what cassava can do for economic transformation. Cassava can displace maltose and barley and high fructose corn syrup in brewing. The Caribbean has breweries in every country. Cassava can displace some of the import of corn and grain that we use in animal feed. Yes, and we're looking at those. Cassava can be used as a consumer product, and we, of course, they have cassava fries here. It's just wonderful, but we don't get those in a lot of countries in the community. But if you go to the United States, it's a big delicacy in lots of restaurants. And it's coming from countries that are further than the countries that are right around, right, North America. So there's a lot of opportunities for us to really work on. And those are some of the really exciting ones that we want to. And let me just say, the last one for cassava is to be used as an adjunct, as one of the big ingredients in milling. So that right now we have a lot of flour that's produced almost purely from wheat. We want to introduce 20-30% cassava in that blend, so that again we're displacing imports for which we're paying hard-earned, scarce foreign exchange with cassava that's produced from within our own community. So the CPSO has really just begun to the opportunities that the heads have handed over to us. We are a small organization. We are being very cautious not to bite off more of these things that we can chew. We want to make sure that we can deliver on the things that we're committed to. Yes, but we are committed to this initiative of how we get CARICOM to feed itself at this time, where we have so many scarcities, rising prices, and unfortunately, growing hunger and poverty in our community. We believe that collectively the CPSO has a role to play in helping the community find solutions to these problems.
All right. Thank you so much for these comments. And with that, we come to the conclusion of this edition of Caribbean Connect. Thank you so much, Mr. Antoine.
Thank you so much for having me. I know as a CARICOM national, I'm welcome to stay. I'm considering staying in Suriname, for as long as you would have me.
You're welcome.
Thank you, my brother.